The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining today's webinar, Taking the Pain Out of Data Conversions. My name is Greg Richards, Director of Marketing for EnableSoft and the host for today's event. Just a few housekeeping points before we begin. All attendees are in listen-only mode, but you can type any questions you have into the chat box on your screen. We'll answer as many of these questions as we can during the event. Any unanswered questions will be addressed within 48 hours of the webinar's close. So without further delay, let's introduce today's topic, Taking the Pain Out of Data Conversions. Our speakers today are Paul Cook, Senior Vice President and CIO of Heritage Oaks Bank, and Richard Milam, Founder and CEO of EnableSoft. Just a quick overview of today's agenda before I turn it over to Richard. We're going to cover data conversions and considerations, then the process itself, your options for conversion, and then we'll turn it over to Paul and wrap up with some Q&A at the end if there's time. Now I'd like to turn it over to Richard Milam. He's the founder and CEO of EnableSoft, has worked for some of the largest core providers that serve banks and credit unions, and has over 50 financial institution conversions under his belt. Please take it away, Richard.
Thank you, Greg. Thank you all for being here with us today. As Greg mentioned, I've been personally involved in a lot of bank conversions, but non-bank or any kind of system of record conversion that is done in an automated manual form is going to be accomplished the same way. So if you're not a bank, this applies to you as well. My first experience with doing bank conversions, I had been a programmer. I developed systems. I worked for the guy that invented the automated teller machine. I did automated teller machine networks all over the world. I sold banking software for about 5 years after that, and then I found myself running around with a banker in the 90s who's helping banks convert savings and loan branches and whole institutions that were divested during the Resolution Trust Corporation divestiture of the 90s. And the way that was being done largely was people, mostly ladies, sitting around boardroom tables with personal computers and green bar reports keying in names and addresses. There was no other way to do it fast enough. The vendors couldn't react fast enough, and the RTC wanted one of those institutions converted. So being the person of expediency that I am, that's also known as lazy, I said we got to figure out a way to automate this, because it was literally weeks and weeks of that to key in all the names and addresses. So long story short, I developed the what program that's now called Foxtrot, and what Foxtrot is will do is, as I'll explain as we go through this, is an accelerator for manual unstructured data processes. So let me go right to the next slide. I hit the right arrow. And so today, EnableSoft is partnered to 500 banks and credit unions. Many of those have done automated conversions. Some of the top 5 banks in the country have did a lot of their manual conversions manually or automated with Foxtrot. And I can't mention their names, but you would know who they were. A third of the top 1,000 banks and half of the top 100 performing banks are Foxtrot banks today. All right, so why do you have to do a conversion? Well, somebody bought a bank, somebody bought a branch, or maybe you're converting your core system. The considerations there is you got data in one place in one format, has to get to a target application in a timely manner in another format. The keys to that are technology to enable it. Maybe it's programming, maybe it's Foxtrot-like technology, and the analysis and the subject matter experts to do the data mapping. Maybe there's things you want to do as you got to go through the mapping process, and there's always going to be mistakes, and we'll talk about those later. Don't get hung up on that. So in a typical bank conversions, you got loans, deposits, general ledger, and then site systems, ATM wire internet. And then IT has a role too. They have to provide the test systems, possibly the user access to the and credentials to be able to do the things that need to be able to be done to add new accounts, customers, do funding transactions. But as our customers have done, and either with or without us, many of them done it on their own, we have a partner that does the consulting on the big conversions. They're called, their company's called BOSS. All those things have to be taken into consideration. Just because you have a technology to automate a conversion, it's still a conversion. So all that analysis has to be done on the data mapping from the deposits from and to, loans from and to. Maybe there's types that are going away. What are those going to? So there's a data mapping process. General ledger mapping has to be done, of course, and then any other side systems. Okay, so and the other considerations are, where's the data coming from? And a file-to-file conversion, usually a set of tapes, or in my time, set of tapes, 9-track tapes. When we actually took that 9-track tape data, downloaded it using software tools, and created a extract tables, flat files to start with. They could come from reports from a source system, or they could come from a extract, which means you're going to have a programmer go through and pull data out of there. But in today's technology landscape, it's usually one way or another easy to get data into a flat file Excel format. And you might have multiple account records and just a name for each account record. They may be duplicates, but we'll talk about that. There's ways to consolidate that when you do an automated online conversion. Many vendors will also create duplicates when they do it, because it's takes a little thinking and hard work to look up and match names and addresses. But how that source data gets to you is really important. There are ways to do it in today's landscape, again, that are easy to get that data into an Excel or a flat file format. So you got the data, you got it mapped, you start adding the static information, customer names and addresses. With our Foxtrot technology, and we are able to teach Foxtrot to test for many things like tax ID, first part of the street address, to say, is this the same customer that's already on the system? If it is, add it to this customer. Otherwise, create a new customer record. Once those customer records are on, that's how the account process goes. Many times the relationships can be preserved if there's codes defining relationships between customers, sole owner, co-owners, etc. That's all part of the mapping process. All right, so we've got source data, customers, information on the other static information, the transaction, account information, checking accounts, DDA, time deposits, savings, IRAs, and loans, commercial, consumer, unsecured, secured. Again, this can be done in a manual conversion weeks before. When I started doing conversions without technology, it would be a lot of weeks before. Many of our customers are able to do it in just a few weeks before. But again, this is information that's not changing. It's put on the target system in advance, onto the live system. If there's updates that need to be added before the actual cutover date, then those can be handled before. All right, so some people wanted to try to do a mock conversion and have a test environment. That is totally fine. Just recognize that if you're going to load all the data on a test system and then on a production system, you have to account for the time to do that. There are ways to test and do mock conversions in advance to see if the results you're getting. But the great thing about a manual automated conversion is everything has to go into the presentation layer of the target system, which means you can't put the wrong data into a certain type of account. If a certain time deposit account is a 1-year account, you try to put 512 days in there, it won't let you. You have to have the data lined up, and there's tools within Foxtrot or other conversion tools to do those data alignments. Many of our customers use Access and Excel programming to do that. You have to make sure that you have sufficient amount of automation licenses to make sure that you've got licenses to run these account loads in the time frame that you're targeting to do that. Our customers that are using our services, we make sure they have enough accounts, enough Foxtrot license to load the accounts. All right, so then it brings us to a cutover date. That's usually on a weekend. You drop statements, take that, everybody takes that balance and starts running transactions through to those accounts to load those balances onto the accounts that are already on the systems. Funding the deposits, advancing the loans, creating the GL offset transactions, and loading the side systems, and there's a balance and audit. So what this looks like to the customers that's been cut over is there's a brand new opening balance for their account on their new system. And if you're a banker, you know you've done this many times. It's just an automated manual way of doing a conversion. Balancing and auditing is usually done that weekend. Make sure that everything lines up with the balances that you were given. And then there are some concerns afterwards. We joke that, when the conversion team leaves the bank, there's usually fingernail scratches on the car as the car leaves because there's lots of stuff that needs to be done. The great thing about a manual conversion is that everything, again, had to go through the presentation layer or the application audits and edits. And so there's not going to be any blow-ups afterwards because some programmer put some data in a field under the covers that's going to blow up when it's processed. That's a really good thing. That's the thing that, as a programmer, I loved about doing these conversions. But there may be some mass maintenance that needs to be done after the fact because somebody had bad information or made a mistake in mapping the data, and some accounts got put to the wrong type. Those could easily be cleaned up with mass maintenance functions. Maybe there's some accruals that were off and need to be run, some accrual transactions that need to be run through. All those things are simplified with Foxtrot. Even we have customers that, even though their vendors doing the conversion, they will use Foxtrot to do pre and post data cleanup. And so I've talked about the conversion process. I'm going to briefly talk about our technology. And again, it works through the presentation layer and subject to all the rules and restrictions put on by the system of record. That means that everything that goes in has to match the business rules that are in place. It's 100% accurate. It's cost effective. So your options: do it manually, outsource the programming, or do custom programming. We call them manual unstructured processes. With Foxtrot, it's no longer a manual unstructured process. It's a automated data process using industry strength Foxtrot technology. So at this point, I'm going to show you a real world case and somebody who's really done it besides myself, Paul Cook, CIO, Senior Vice President at Heritage Oaks Bank. Heritage Oaks is the largest publicly traded bank in the Central Coast of California. And without further ado, you see Paul's credentials. We've gotten to know him as a partner and friend. Take it away, Paul.
Thank you very much for the introduction. I appreciate the time and having an opportunity to share some of our experiences as we've been able to use EnableSoft's Foxtrot to make our data conversions and data changes a lot easier. As it was said, I'm with Heritage Oaks Bank. I've been here for about a year, and they were already extensively using Foxtrot, although I've used this software in previous lives. and it's very helpful. We're currently a $1.6 billion financial institution. Heritage Oaks Bank has been around since 1983. We currently have 18 branches. We will be consolidating to 11 once all of our post-acquisitions and conversions are done. And as it was stated, we are the largely public traded community bank in the Santa Barbara, San Luis Obispo, and Ventura counties. That really puts us kind of in the Central Coast. For those who are interested, we're literally about halfway in between San Francisco and Los Angeles. So it's a great climate and a great place to be, and I'm excited to be here. So let's talk a little bit about automating the data conversion and how we've used it. So as you can imagine, anytime you're doing an acquisition, you usually have different data systems. And one of the things that you're always concerned about is working on your general ledgers and making sure that that is as clean as possible. Especially with some of the cores like that we're in right now, there's sometimes a charge for the number of GL accounts that you have. And so it's always good to purge those off, but it can be very time consuming. Well, it isn't if you have a software package such as EnableSoft or Foxtrot. And all it is it's a matter of thinking of those manual keystrokes that you would normally just type in and be very time consuming. You literally write a script so that you're not having to write or to actually push those keys and the keystrokes. The scripting does all of that for you. So very, very quickly, we were able to consolidate and collapse the GL builds and accounts that we needed before we did the conversion, as well as doing some work after the conversion. And after the conversion, we were able to, again, cut down on those GLs and make sure that they all flowed correctly and that every number was pointing to the right account, even from the new bank. This saved us over $6,000 if we had reached out to the core, and easily just as much or even more, really, if you think of the man time that would have been involved in this. And so you set your script up, you have it read the screens, and make the appropriate keystrokes, and you're done. It's really a great process. Next slide, thank you. So even working with the data after the branch acquisitions, and during. So we had over 2,000 DDA, multiple savings account, multiple IRAs, 900 ATM cards. It just goes on and on and on. I mean, think of all the aspects that you're involved in when you do a conversion and you're acquiring a new bank. All the changes that have to happen. Again, you're faced with looking at how are we going to do it. You can either get the core provider involved and pay a lot of money for a programmer. You can hire a bunch of employees that are going to go in and manually keystroke out the data, but then you have to worry about what errors are they introducing, because everyone knows you're going to have at least a 1 or 2% potential error rate on everything that the employees touch, and that's if you're on a good day. Or you can set it up so that you have your data in one format, you have your scripting through Foxtrot on another, and then it's just automatically flowing all the data through account by account. It's very quick, it's clean, and it's simple. And so what this really does for you is it eliminates errors, and it saves money. Because when you have to do 20,000 plus accounts like we've had to do on various conversions, it's a very complicated process. But again, when you have Foxtrot going, and we have it actually running on multiple computers. We have 5 computer systems that we're able to run Foxtrot on. And through those 5 computers, it's like having 5 people, but even faster, because as quick as the screen changes, you can get your data populated and entered. And so we are very comfortable with the software. And it doesn't have to just be account conversions. It can be a whole variety of different types of data that we've done. Next slide. So let's talk about that. So we have a process. We used Foxtrot specifically for the 3,000 accounts after our branch acquisition. We had it do preps and cleanups of over 17,000 accounts for the bank acquisitions. And this allows us to see the variety of things that Foxtrot can do. But what's really important, Foxtrot is basically a one-time purchase. Then you have some annual maintenance. but we've been able to use it for all these different things. So we've done it for GLs, we've done it for account conversions, we've done it for bringing over entire DDA structures and the accounts and all the history. And all the matter it is getting the data ahead of time, knowing what you want entered, and then letting Foxtrot do all the hard work. And so I'm kind of repeating myself, but I really want to drive this point home. If you want to fully engage your core providers for changes like this, you can be looking at hundreds of thousands of dollars. You can be looking at bringing in somebody on a temporary basis or lining up your employees and taking them away from their critical jobs already. Or you can just use a really efficient, fast scripting language that goes in and really does the hard work for you. And then once the software is owned, you can automate any aspect of the accounts that you want. You know, we've used it for consolidating business accounts as well. Or if there's a product line that you're no longer wanting to offer and you want to transfer it to a different product line. You know, just think of anything that a person does manually in your core, and you can automate it. And that's why we've used it for the general ledger. We've used it for account consolidations. We've used it for reissuing debit cards. In fact, today, right now, we have it running to cover a breach that we experienced. And so it will automatically go through and pre-select the cards and take the customers, not a breach that Heritage Oaks had, but Home Depot very specifically. So we're using that to aid in that. And so there's just so many different purposes that Foxtrot can help you with. It just makes it a very clean and simple process. And it brings it down from multiple people to really just one and a few computers. We're just really excited about the product and happy to share in its benefit for anyone. Appreciate that.
Okay. Thank you very much, Paul Cook from Heritage Oaks Bank. We appreciate you not only joining us today, but obviously for advocating for us and on behalf of EnableSoft and Foxtrot, and for sharing your knowledge with everybody that's in attendance today. We really, really appreciate it. So thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you. The time has come now, ladies and gentlemen, to type any questions you've got into the questions box on your screen. Each of you along the right-hand side of your screen should have a GoToWebinar module, and inside of that is a tab that says questions. Go ahead and enter any questions you've got. Okay, so we have a few coming in here. We'll go ahead and target the first one. I'll refer this one to Richard. Other than cost, why would a particular financial institution choose Foxtrot over, say, going with their core vendor for a data conversion?
Well, quite simply timing. It's been my experience, Greg, over the years, 20 years of doing this. Oftentimes the vendor cannot meet the time frame that is demanded for the conversion, either by the regulators or the business concerns of the financial institution. You can take your destiny in your own hands conversion-wise with this approach.
Can I add one thing to that? Is that okay?
Yeah, please go ahead, Paul.
So the other thing I've encountered sometimes with your various core providers is that they will only give you maybe several options when you're doing a core conversion or any type of data conversion. Well, we can do this, this, or this. And you're like, well, I really want, this data field, or I want these options selected. Well, I understand that, but that's a manual process. Our programmers don't do it. Well, with Foxtrot, you can't do that. You can customize whatever aspect of the data conversion or the data manipulation that is normally available in your core screen, and Foxtrot will automate and do all of that for you. So it's timing, it's cost, and your options.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's a fantastic point. Hey, Paul, if you don't mind, I'll steer this one to you as well, and that's how much technical know-how is required to use Foxtrot. Maybe we can sort of extrapolate that and say, sort of what's the onboarding time, to get up and running, I suppose, with Foxtrot? How much technical know-how do you need to start using and saving time with Foxtrot?
You know, I think one of the most important things is for the person to really understand the core and the core screens. And then if you're willing to just go through, you know, a few hours of tutorial, I think anybody who has any knowledge of writing any type of macro in any software would very quickly pick up on this, very quickly pick on this. If they've never done a macro or some kind of keystroke programming, it might be a few more hours, but I don't think it's very complicated.
Okay, thank you.
I have a follow-on.
Sure, go ahead.
Paul, so how would you describe Foxtrot's functionality in contrast to macros or keystroke tools?
So, you know, your keystroke tools or your macros really are good for very single purposes where the screen isn't changing in the data. In other words, if it's just a one-time function, those macros or their keystrokes can be great. But what Foxtrot really is doing, it's doing screen scraping. It's going in and using intelligence to understand what's flowing behind the data from screen to screen to screen. Would you put it that way, Greg?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, Foxtrot obviously has that capability to sort of extract data and pull data from your screen and move it to different places and different screens. It's also got, which I think you alluded to in a previous answer, some intelligence built into it. So whereas a macro might be positionally oriented, right? So if something, a button, a field on your screen changes position for one reason or another, or your window is minimized, your macro is obviously affected. Whereas with Foxtrot, it's object-oriented. So regardless of where a button resides or a field resides, Foxtrot, or even if your window is minimized, Foxtrot will find those objects and still execute the script that you run. So you know, there's definitely some pluses and minuses, but you know, one of those deciding factors is probably the intelligence that Foxtrot possesses. So last, we got time for one more question here probably, and then we'll wrap up. And I'll direct this one to you, Richard, and that is, how secure is Foxtrot with that customer data that we've talked about here today?
Very secure, Greg. The data never, you know, is never handled by people that are, you know, outside the organization, because you're not trying to do a bunch of manual data entry. Foxtrot has to have credentials to log on, to push data in and out, just like a human does. So all the audit trails are in place. Again, as I mentioned before, the data validations. You know, those files that have the data in them, you need to protect that you're feeding into the Foxtrot functions need to be protected just like any asset that you have. So you still have to use your data, normal data protection, file protection disciplines.
Absolutely. Well, thank you both, Richard and Paul. Thanks for the answers here, and thanks to everybody that asked a question. We appreciate it. Thanks for attending today, by the way. We know your time is valuable, and we appreciate you sharing some of it with us. We want to leave you here with just our contact information. Obviously, you were kind enough to attend today. We would encourage you here as a next step to give us a call. 800-215-9397 is our number. Of course, you can always email us at sales@enablesoft.com, or you can visit us on the web at enablesoft.com. And then finally, we always like to close these sessions with a quote from Henry Ford, who was not a banker, but he knew a lot about efficiency. And he said, if you need a solution and you don't buy it, then you'll ultimately find you have paid for it and don't own it. And that's certainly true with what we've talked about here today, and that definitely applies, I think, to Foxtrot and this sort of technology. So again, thank you everybody for joining us. We appreciate your time, and please enjoy the rest of your afternoon. If you have any questions after the event, please feel free to email them to sales@enablesoft.com, and we will do our best to respond in a timely fashion. Thank you very much. Have a great afternoon. Goodbye, everybody.